Genesis 21. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave him the name Isaac. To the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she added, Who will have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children, yet I have borne him a son in his old age? Sarah, by the way, was 90 years old. Genesis 22. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there. As a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. He said to his servants, Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you. Abraham took the wood for the burnt offering and placed it on his son Isaac, and he himself carried the fire and the knife. As the 2 of them went on together, Isaac spoke up and said to his father Abraham, Father? Yes, my son, Abraham replied. The fire and wood are here, Isaac said, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? Abraham answered, God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son. And the 2 of them went on together. When they reached the place God had told him about, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood on it. He bound his son Isaac and laid him on the altar on top of the wood. Then he reached out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But the angel of the Lord called out to him from heaven, Abraham, Abraham. Here I am, he replied. Do not lay a hand on the boy, he said. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, and there in a thicket he saw a ram caught by its horns. He went over and took the ram and sacrificed it as a burnt offering instead of his son. So Abraham called that place, The Lord will provide. And to this day it is said, On the mountain of the Lord it will be provided. The angel of the Lord called to Abraham from heaven a second time and said, I swear by myself, declares the Lord, that because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies. And through your offspring, all nations on earth will be blessed because you have obeyed me. Then Abraham returned to his servants, and they set off together for Beersheba, and Abraham stayed in Beersheba. Luke 1. In the time of Herod, king of Judah, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. His wife Elizabeth was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. Once when Zechariah's division was on duty and he was serving as a priest before God, he was chosen by Lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to go into the temple of the Lord and burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshippers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and a delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He is never to take wine or other fermented drink, and he will be filled with the Holy Spirit even before he is born. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God, and he will go on before the Lord in the spirit and power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of the parents and their children to their children, and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. Zechariah asked the angel, How can I be sure of this? I am an old man, and my wife is well along in years. The angel said to him, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and for 5 months remained in seclusion. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "In these days, he has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." Okay, I just want to review kind of what it is that is standing out to me, because part of the reason I'm reading this has to do with what we're dealing with right now. And I need some strength. I need strength in his word. And this is where my strength is going to come from, is from standing on what God has done and who he is. It's not going to come from talking to human experts. It's not going to come from hearing people's opinions. It's going to come from God. It's going to come from standing on who God is and what he's already done, and believing in the word that he's given us. In Genesis 21, Sarah, who was 90 years old, gave birth to Isaac, and Abraham was 100 years old. And you might say, well, people lived a long time back then. That was the norm. But who sets the norm? Who's the one who does that? Why can't that be the norm now? If I will it to be, why can't that be the norm now? Because my will is nothing. It's only God's will that makes things happen. And not only that, but it wasn't normal for a 90-year-old to give birth. Sarah she laughed. She laughed when she heard that she was going to give birth. So she knew that it was unusual. She knew that that was kind of crazy. But God made it happen. And God gave them a child. And then he told Abraham to sacrifice his child to test Abraham's heart. To see if what? What does the word tell us? To see if Abraham feared the Lord. And now he knows that he fears the Lord because he was willing to give his only son. And it was at the very last hour that God showed up and said, and gave him that ram. But he tested Abraham, and I can only imagine what Abraham was feeling as he was walking with his son, as his little son is carrying this stuff, and he's so obedient to his father. The fire's ready, Father. And then he's he's binding his son to be sacrificed. What would he be feeling? Think about that. You're unable to have a child because people back then actually wanted their kids. They understood that that was a blessing and an honor. And they say things like, take away my disgrace. They actually wanted their kids. They didn't, sacrifice them on purpose on the altars of abortion. Sarah and Abraham must have been thrilled that they had this child. And now he was going to sacrifice him. And the lesson there is that God tested him to see if he feared him. And then Zechariah, who's up there in age, and his wife, Elizabeth, who's up there in age, are told that they're going to have a son, but Zechariah doesn't believe. And because he doesn't believe, Gabriel says, I stand in the place of God, and I've been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news. And now you will be silent and not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. We're expected to believe his words. We're expected to believe all of this, that God put a baby in Elizabeth, that God put a baby in Sarah. And you know why this is so hard to go through this right now? Because no one believes. No one else believes that this is true. Because if they did, they wouldn't keep speaking on the authority of the world. I don't know anyone who's doing this. Who believes that much that they will not bow a knee to Baal, that they are willing to give their only child, even after having been told that they could not have a child, that they know that God put that baby in their womb and that he will bring it to fruition. But he's doing something right now. And it makes it really hard to stand when everyone else is saying things that speak on the authority of the world, as though they don't actually believe what this word says, what God has done, defied the science that, by the way, didn't exist before him. He is the God who defies the science, who foils the signs of the false prophets and false teachers and false experts. 1 Samuel chapter 1. Once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went to pray. Eli the priest was sitting in his customary place beside the entrance of the tabernacle. Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord. And she made this vow, O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime, and as a sign that has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. As she was praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. Seeing her lips moving but hearing no sound, he thought she had been drinking. "Must you come here drunk?" he demanded. "Throw away your wine." "Oh, no, sir," she replied. "I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I'm very discouraged, and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I'm a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow." "In that case," Eli said, "go in peace. May the God of Israel grant the request you have asked of him." "Oh, thank you, sir," she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. The entire family got up early the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned home to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I asked the Lord for him." The next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and to keep his vow. But Hannah did not go. She told her husband, "Wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently." "Whatever you think is best," Elkanah agreed. "Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you to keep your promise." So she stayed at home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh. They brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. "Sir, do you remember me?" Hannah asked. "I am the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord. I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I am giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life." And they worshiped the Lord there. You know, 3 of the 4 matriarchs in the Bible were barren, and they were given babies: Sarah, Rebecca, and Rachel. We read about Sarah, now we're going to read about Rebecca, and then we'll read about Rachel. Genesis 25, verse 19. This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son, Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, and the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. The babies jostled each other within her, and she said, "Why is this happening to me?" So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, "2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger." When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. So they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. All right, the point here is that God had a purpose. He had a purpose in Rebekah, who was barren, but her husband prayed for her, and she was able to conceive. And God had a purpose in these children that she bore. He had a plan. He knew what he was doing. We didn't know. They didn't know. We don't know now. But he knows, and he will reveal his plan at the proper time, just as he did with Rebekah. If we just choose him, if we just lean into him, he's going to reveal his plan. He's going to reveal what he's doing, and everyone will understand. I have a friend who's been fasting and praying, and I asked him, "Has the Lord revealed anything to you through this fast?" Because I know that he does that when we fast. When we return to him, he starts talking. And that's exactly what he told me, that God is going to make things clear. Something is going to be cleared up. Something is going to make sense. God knows what he's doing, and he will reveal it at the proper time. Genesis 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." So she gave him her servant Bilhah as his wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, "God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son." Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, "I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won." So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "What good fortune!" She named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "How happy I am! The women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, "Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take away my son's mandrakes too?" "Very well," Rachel said. "He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes." So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. "You must sleep with me," she said. "I have hired you with my son's mandrakes." Goodness. So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said, "God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband." So she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said, "God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons." So she named him Zebulun. Sometime later she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. So who enabled her to conceive? Who puts that baby in your womb? God enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, "God has taken away my disgrace." She named him Joseph and said, "May the Lord add to me another son." God did all these things. He's the one who enables the womb to conceive. I mean, the very fact that you can have an egg and sperm that come together to make a baby or form a baby, and that baby, by no work of our own, is built in our body. How can we even deny the power of God, especially when we have all of these examples of people who have been made capable of giving birth, defying everything that science would have to say about this? You're barren. You're too old. You have PCOS. All of the things that they have to say. They are without knowledge, they are without authority, and they are without power. God has no use for any of it. Now let me tell you God's position. After Ahab's death, 2 Kings 1, after Ahab's death, Moab rebelled against Israel. Now Ahaziah had fallen through the lattice of his upper room in Samaria and injured himself. So he sent messengers saying to them, "Go and consult of Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, to see if I will recover from this injury." Do you think it's different when we are consulting with fertility, quote unquote, experts, when we're consulting with medicine to find out whether we're going to live or die? Do you think it's different from consulting with Beelzebub? Because Beelzebub is nothing, and neither is any kind of expert. Anyone who speaks on the authority of the world has no truth in them. So he sent messengers saying to them, "Go and consult with Beelzebub, the god of Ekron, to see if I will recover from this injury." So he has already set up Beelzebub as the god of Ekron. But the angel of the Lord said to Elijah the Tishbite, "Go up and meet the messengers of the king of Samaria and ask them, is it because there is no God in Israel that you are going off to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore this is what the Lord says, you will not leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die." So Elijah went. When the messengers returned to the king, he asked them, "Why have you come back?" "A man came to meet us," they replied, "and he said to us, 'Go back to the king who sent you and tell him, this is what the Lord says. Is it because there is no God in Israel that you are sending messengers to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Therefore you will not leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die.' The king asked them, 'What kind of man was it who came to meet you and told you this?' They replied, 'He had a garment of hair and had a leather belt around his waist.' The king said, 'That was Elijah the Tishbite.' Then he sent to Elijah a captain with his company of 50 men. The captain went up to Elijah, who was sitting on top of the hill, and said to him, 'Man of God, the king says, come down.' Elijah answered the captain, If I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men." Then fire fell from heaven and consumed the captain and his men. So look, look who's also experiencing his judgment. Anybody who is standing in that false authority. God will not put up with it forever. Elijah answered the captain, if I am a man of God, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. Then fire from heaven then fire fell from heaven and consumed the captain and his men. At this, the king sent to Elijah another captain with 50 men. The captain said to him, Man of God, this is what the king says, come down at once. If I am a man of God, Elijah said, may fire come down from heaven and consume you and your 50 men. Then the fire of God fell from heaven and consumed him and his 50 men. So the king sent a third captain with his 50 men. This third captain went up and fell on his knees before Elijah. Man of God, he begged, please have respect for my life and the lives of these 50 men, your servants. See, fire has fallen from heaven and consumed the first 2 captains and all their men. But now have respect for my life. The angel of the Lord said to Elijah, go down with him. Do not be afraid of him. So Elijah got up and went down with him to the king. He told the king, this is what the Lord says. Is it because there is no God in Israel for you to consult, that you have sent messengers to consult Beelzebub, the god of Ekron? Because you have done this, you will never leave the bed you are lying on. You will certainly die. So he died, according to the word of the Lord that Elijah had spoken. Because Ahaziah had no son, Joram succeeded him as king in the 2nd year of Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah. As for all the other events of Ahaziah's reign and what he did, are they not written in the book of the annals of the kings of Israel? A few things that I want to talk about here. Ahaziah consulted with a false god. He was warned. He continued. All of those who stood on that authority with him, died. And God not only wiped out Ahaziah, but he made sure that his house did not continue. He had no son to succeed him. His house was cut off. I fear God. Abraham feared God. My household fears God. They know who their God is. And I want you to remember that God says that in the last days, that Antichrist is going to flatter those who forsake their holy covenant. But those who know their God are going to firmly resist him. And part of our covenant is that we believe that that the Lord is the one who sends disease and he is the one who takes it away. That we believe that he's done all of these things in the Bible. That we're not denying his sovereignty. That we don't have the appearance of godliness, but deny the power of God to create, to give life, to take life, and to work miracles. Because these are all miracles that we're talking about. He had the power to give life, and he also had the power to take the life of Ahaziah and make sure that no one else in his house ever sat on that throne again. And as difficult as this is to stand right now and to watch those I love in pain, this is what we're going to do. And I ask you to stand with me. Stand with me in that faith and in prayer and work your own heart into understanding, into belief that this is the God who gives life. He is the God who performs miracles. He is the God who takes life. Because this is not just a test for my own family. This is a test for all of us. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making these videos. I wouldn't be sharing with you what we're going through. I'm sharing with you because I'm setting an example for you. Because when the Antichrist reigns, it's not going to be as simple as saying, no, I'm not going to take the tattoo. I'm not going to take the chip. I'm not going to, take the jab. No, it's going to be a lot more complicated than that. And God has been raising us to trust him, to understand what's going down right now, to understand what was going on in 2020 when the shutdowns were happening and we were being forced to take a jab. There's nothing like forcing you to do it to make you feel like it's super safe. Why is that necessary? Why is the world so invested in whether or not we do that? You realize common sense says you can still carry a bug. If you're contagious and asymptomatic and you don't have whatever it is, you can still carry that on to other people. So the rationale that you're protecting anybody makes absolutely no sense. You're not protecting anyone. It's a lie. I saw on the news today that there's some eye drops that were out for like dry eyes that people put in their eyes, and they're making people go blind. And people had to have their eyeballs removed because of an eye drop. We will sit around a table and we will talk all day about how big pharma, insurance companies, medicine, they're all corrupt. And naturopath and homeopathy, they're no better. In fact, some of them can be even worse. We'll sit around and talk about that, but then go to our doctor's appointments in the morning and speak on that authority. And when something comes up, we don't think that God is enough to fix it. We don't think that God is enough to teach us something and build us, because the people in the Bible did. They believed that he was enough, and he showed up and he proved that he was enough. And so I'm just setting the example for you of actually believing in that, standing on it. God is enough. He knows what he's doing. He has a plan in all of this, and his plan is good. And he knows our breaking points, and he will not take us beyond that breaking point, but he is going to take us to the wall. And I want to tell you something else. You give Satan even that little sliver, that little crack. That's something we've learned in this situation. You give him that little crack of even consulting. Remember the lesson of Ahaziah, even consulting, and you'll be dealt with. We are in a battle right now. We're in a battle. And I know that God is breaking strongholds off of my family right now because I feel the battle. I feel him testing to make sure that we are not going to choose false gods. I feel him testing, and I also feel him requiring, because remember that when God is purifying you and he's removing these things out of your heart, he's going to test that structure. Remember, I'm not a builder, okay? I don't know anything really about building, but I know some common sense things that you're going to have to test that frame, and you're going to have to test that foundation to make sure that whatever you've laid is going to stand, is going to hold up, is going to remain upright. And if you don't test it, you're not counting the cost, like Jesus said. You have to count the cost. And that's what he's doing right now. He's testing to make sure that we are firm in him, that we're not going to waver and we're not going to collapse. God is enough. God knows what he's doing. And I've only read you a few stories. There are many, many more written in this word. And I think one of the things that I need to do as a mother is to stand in what I know. One of the lessons for me has been, I was respecting whatever their decision was. I was still making my position known, but I need to stand in what I know. I need to stand, not just make it known. I need to stand in it. I need to be the strength when my children can't. When they're struggling, I need to be that strength. Because you know what happens when you're that strength, when you're speaking truth? God testifies to it. But if we won't be used by that, how will our children be blessed through us? They're going to have to go through more. And as parents, we have responsibilities to break the things that we introduced. I introduced false gods because of the way that I raised my child and the way that the things that I had submitted to that my parents introduced to me. But you know what? I have the responsibility to stop that. So I understand right now that as a mother, I have to stand. I can't leave any option for there to be something else to do, something else to subsidize God's sovereignty, because he's making it clear right now that we got to choose, and we got to choose single-mindedly. There cannot be any reservation. Please be an example to your children. If you claim that you believe in this word, then be an example of it. Thank you for listening. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next video.